The Pick. The Pick. Another good episode. Definitely, though, not as enthusiastic about it as I am from the airport, but it is another good episode that in the previous episode, um, Jerry, things worked out for him. This one, though, more so Kramer, I felt like had the success. Elaine was a very unlucky one. George is the one who got himself back into something, but then had second thoughts again and resorted to something similar. And Kramer came out probably the most successful in this one. My favorite storyline, though, in this one was definitely what happened with Elaine. That one was funny. So the story was, of course, Jerry. The airport was one of the first episodes in the series that did not really follow up from something that had happened from the previous episodes. This one, the thing that it kind of followed up with is, Jerry was still going out with Tia, that model that he met at the airport, in first class on her way home to St. Louis. George, though, is starting to regret breaking up with Susan. He's heartbroken, he's moaning, he's groaning, he's just, saying, should I call her? And, everybody's telling him, no, that's not a good idea. He's singing all this stuff, he's just heartbroken, it's just he's depressed. Elaine recommends that he goes sees her psychiatrist friend, Dana Foley. Or I think that was her name, Dana Foley, I think it was. So even though his mom had suggested George go see a psychiatrist for the longest time, he wouldn't do it. Now he actually wants to do it. He wants to get his emotions and feelings figured out and checked, and he also wants to see if there's any way he can salvage his relationship with Susan. So, that happens. And then, Tia first gets brought up because Elaine notices that Tia gave Jerry a Christmas card. And then it had her photo on, and Elaine's like, I should do something like that sometime. Kramer, though, says that he has the equipment, he could take the picture, but he suggests her putting on a different outfit. And she was like, okay, sure, I'll do that. Let's go for it. So, they disappear off, and they go take the photograph. While George goes off to see Elaine's psychiatrist friend, which at first he mentioned Dr. Reston, who was Elaine's boyfriend, also a psychiatrist who was the one who was also had Crazy Joe the Wolff's patient. He's like, oh no, not him. Like, no, and that was this Dana Foley. So he goes and sees Dana, but the problem that we had was that the zipper on his jacket got stuck. And instead of talking about Susan, they focused the whole time on focusing on the jacket, unfortunately. Meanwhile, Tia, in the one scene, Tia was at Jerry's apartment. And she was showing him the recent the Calvin Klein catalog and the new perfume that she was advertising. And Jerry smelled it on her, and he said, it smells familiar. And he realized it was the ocean. It was the same perfume, and that idea that Kramer had pitched to Calvin Klein in the previous season. And he was afraid Kramer would smell it, and Kramer would freak out and, just cause this whole big fiasco. So then he hears Kramer's door shut. He's like, oh no, he's only coming across the hall. So he goes to lock the door, but as he goes to lock the door, Kramer starts opening up the door. And he wanted to borrow one of Jerry's cleaning supplies, something like that. But he basically tells Tia and Kramer stay on complete opposite sides of the room, don't get near each other. Which Kramer's like, why the heck is that? While Jerry's in the bedroom pulling out the stuff that Kramer needs, Kramer notices that Tia's pretty tall, and he goes, well, how tall are you? She goes, 5'10". He goes, let's measure back to back. They're about to do that, but then Jerry goes, no, breaks him up. And then Kramer goes, what's that smell? It smells familiar. And then Jerry goes, oh, I don't know. And he takes the hand thing he was using, and he just brushes it around in front of Tia, just trying to get rid of the smell. And Kramer's like, I don't know, it smells familiar for some reason. So Jerry gives Kramer the what he needed. I can't remember what the machine was called. And he walks out. And then Jerry's like, whew, that was close. So he thought that Kramer did notice the smell, thought he was good. All of a sudden, off camera, you hear him yell out, "The beach! The beach!" He comes back in, and that's when he finds out that they basically took his idea, and he's not getting any credit for it. He's like, I could have been a millionaire. So he was going to go after Calvin Klein for that. Then Elaine, her Christmas card sends out, and she happened to be there when it all happens. When Jerry sees it. So Jerry opens up the card and looks at it. It says it turned out good. And then he goes, did you look at this picture carefully? She goes, yeah, why? And he goes, now, I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I see a nipple. And then Elaine was like, what do you mean? And he said, look. And sure enough, Elaine notices her nipple was exposed on the card. And she's freaking out. She's like, oh my God, that's my nipple. She's like, I gave it to all these people. I sent it to, her nephews got it. Her sister got it. A couple of religious people she mentioned got it. Her boyfriend, Fred, who she was with at the time, who was a super religious man, she sent it to him. And she's freaked out. She's like, I sent this card to like hundreds of people. And of course, this episode and an upcoming episode, apparently there was one people who were wondering, well, how did Elaine not get in trouble for sending this photo out, basically, which is a little bit like a continuity error, which I definitely get why they wouldn't do that. But yeah, so she's freaked out. She's like, it was an accident, I didn't mean to do that, whatnot. And then Jerry's like, I'm sure only a few people maybe noticed that Kramer came in, who again basically says he's going after Calvin Klein, and he checks out the card, and he doesn't notice it first, and then Elaine's pointing out, what's that? Oh, and then Boy goes, whoa! And he knows it too, that what happened. He goes, they didn't notice. And Elaine's blaming Kramer, saying that if you wouldn't have suggested me to wear that shirt you told me to wear. And then Jerry says, how about this? Let's go get Newman and see if he would recognize it. Which I think this is the first time since, gotta say, maybe The Ticket we've seen Newman, I think. So Jerry goes and gets Newman, and as Wayne Knight says, this is kind of Newman, playing that role as designated hitter, which at this point he's realizing more and more he's basically like the fifth member of the main crew, even though he's a recurring character and not always on every show. So he comes in, they show the card, and they say, you know anything about this, Newman? He goes, yeah, your nipple's exposed. And of course, those make him feel better. Now, is that it? Can I go now? And he leaves. Wayne Knight, though, says that he thinks that was a little out of character. He says he thinks that Newman should have left with the card, which, I do agree. Him being as immature as he was, he definitely, could have. But of course, though, George sees the card, though, when he's at his appointment with Dana, and he later confronts Elaine and is like, hey, how come I didn't get a Christmas card? Everyone else got a Christmas card. Jerry got one. Kramer got one. I thought we were good friends. I don't get a Christmas card. At this point, Elaine's all fed up because she's then saying how people are calling her Nip at the office because of, the photo. And Elaine goes, you want a Christmas card? You want a Christmas card? I'll give you a card. Here's your Christmas card. And she's like shoves his head into her chest, which apparently was not in the script. And George was just like, his hair was all messed up and whatnot and everything from it. Meantime, too, he's still depressed over Susan. But before this, though, Jerry was out driving, and he was at a red light, and he just happened to scratch the right side of his nose. As he's doing this, though, he looks over, and in the cab next to him was Tia. And she took it as the angle was that she thought that Jerry was picking his nose. He was just scratching his nose. And she wouldn't return his calls for days. It was 4 days go by, she wouldn't return his call. Of course, George was asking, was there any nostril penetration and all those other questions. And of course, Kramer's still trying to get Jerry to get Tia to, we'll talk to Tia about, that perfume, since again, it was his idea. He says he's not able to get a hold of her. So he calls Tia, and she calls, she won't pick up. So he calls Calvin Klein, and she's there at that current time. So they decide to go to Calvin Klein. One, for Jerry to find Tia, and two, for Kramer to confront Calvin Klein, because once again, he got his idea stolen. Well, Jerry goes and finds Tia, but Tia was like, I'm too busy, I can't talk to you, just avoiding the best he can. But basically, she wasn't going to acknowledge the fact that she was disgusted, and wouldn't give Jerry a chance to say, hey, it was not a pick, it was a scratch, basically. And then as Tia was getting on an elevator, he was saying all this stuff from Shakespeare, and he ends it by going, I am not an animal! Kramer, meanwhile, goes to talk to Calvin Klein, but instead of getting getting some resolved with the beach or the ocean perfume that he suggested, he ends up being asked to, be a model himself. And Michael Richards, to admit he was a little uncomfortable with this, but he had to come out literally in his underwear with makeup all over his body. And they just analyzed him, but of course, Michael Richards has to do some type of, clumsy act. He falls over and hits the wall and falls to the floor, but the makeup on his back smeared all over the wall, which was, a nice little act in there to add in. Meanwhile, George ends up getting together with Susan. They meet as monks, and George says that he was trying to get back together with her. Susan says that she needs to be with someone more stable, and she also doesn't think that they had a lot in common. George goes on saying something about how these other people who didn't have things completely in common, but they worked through things, which was something kind of tender you want to hear from George. So Susan takes his hand, and they seemingly get back together. Now, earlier in the episode, when he was sulking over her, George mentioned something about the fact that he even remembers there was a long walk up the stairs to her apartment. He said he would take that walk again. So they show us another scene with George and Susan walking up those stairs. Susan's looking all happy and everything. George, though, looks like he's regretting it. And sure enough, he felt like he made a mistake and said that he shouldn't have done this. So, in the midst of all that, Elaine's still being called Nip at work, and she was freaking out to people because of that. Her boyfriend dumped her, who was super religious about it, and, basically, she got the wrong end of the stick on that one. At last scene in Monks, George told a story about, again, how he was feeling walking up the stairs, so he had to get out of it some way. When it came to him, the pick. He said that he was up to his wrist when she came out. So, I don't know if George somehow was able to stick his whole entire hand up to the wrist up his nose, but who knows. But, basically, she freaked out, and George got out of it again. Kramer came in, and I guess the ad to Calvin Klein magazine with, his modeling photos appeared. And, they were looking at it, it came out good, this and that. But Elaine goes, did you look at this carefully? Because I'm not sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I see your scene cut off, because obviously the original idea came from apparently one of the writers or something like that. Something about some writer Mark Jafe received a similar Christmas card from a male friend who had accidentally had some of his male genitals exposed, which of course was not good, of course. And of course, Elaine, though, was not lucky with the nipple. But apparently, it looked like Kramer had the same thing exposed in that Calvin Klein ad. And that's how the pick ends. Weird episode, definitely, with, the Christmas card, the scratch, not the pick, Newman just, being thrown in there for random reason, George trying to get back together with Susan, and of course, Kramer going after Calvin Klein, for taking his idea. Weird episode, but it's still good. I like it. The next one, I believe, is the Visa, I think it is. Well, before we get there, just a couple of fun facts about this episode. Again, I said that's where it came from. With that, again, I said also earlier, the scene where Elaine shoves George's face into her chest was not scripted at all whatsoever. The only other thing that I really can say also that I see here is, originally they were going to title this episode "The Nipple," but then Larry David thought that was going to be a little too suggestive or whatnot, so instead they changed it to "The Pick," because the pick did help, of course. Well, it was bad news for Jerry, but it was good news for George when he realized he made a mistake again with Susan. Even though it's not this is not the last time we're going to see Susan in this season. We think we see her in 2 more episodes this season, and we won't see her again until season 7, and then of course George tries to get out of it again, and this time unfortunately it was not really good news for Susan. But of course they called it "The Pick" instead of "The Nipple." But yep, that's my thoughts on the Pick episode. Next, I believe, is the Visa, which will be the return of a certain Pakistani friend of Jerry's that at the beginning he helps out, but then it goes south for him. Brian George's exact explanation will come out smoothly in the next review for the Visa. So guys, that is my thoughts on the Pick episode. What are your thoughts on the Pick? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. Follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirBoy93. And with that, guys, I'm checking out. I'll see you all later. Have a great rest of your day. And peace out, everybody.